Okay, well, day 2 and our track sessions begin, so welcome everybody. Just quickly, I'm Kathy Morris. I head up leadership development at Royal Sun Alliance Insurance Company at the moment. That's my current role. Very pleased to introduce you to the Learning in Practice session, which is track 4 for today. And we're kicking off with learning and the mind. Sounds very spooky, doesn't it? I think it was quite interesting to hear our Jonathan talking about the common thread of all that change not being quite what people expected, being human nature. And I think we've seen a lot about technology, we've seen a lot of new shiny things in the last 24 hours or so, and we quite often forget that actually all our learners have an exceptional piece of kit on board that actually is critical to them learning when we're trying to give them that information. So we've got a very esteemed panel, our doctors in the house, so to talk to you today. Dr. Itiel Dror is going to talk to you just now, and he'll be followed by Dr. Chris Appleton. So very pleased to see them, and they're going to help us understand the workings of the mind, particularly in the context of learning. So I'm going to kick off straight away, because I know that many of you are probably here because you're part of the Itiel fan club. If you've seen him present before, he's very engaging and gives us lots of good and interesting, juicy bites. So just very quickly, for those of you that don't know Itiel, he's a cognitive neuroscientist, currently doing work with the University College of London, but also for Cognitive Consultants International. He particularly explores how training can enhance performance and outcomes by looking at the sort of performance through the brain and how we can make learning brain-friendly, and then looking at utilizing technology to make that learning more effective. So lots of interesting stuff there. He's just written a book, which is about to come out, which I'm sure you'll tell them about, won't you, Itiel? So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let Itiel get up there and do his stuff.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Can you hear me in the back? Excellent. So we don't have a lot of time, about 25 minutes, half an hour. So I'll get into the material right away. And I put a lot of it on the web site. So if you are not able to keep up with the pace, then you can go to the website. And if there's not enough time, I'm happy to talk to you later. Or you can send me an email. So building learning with a brain in mind. We're talking about brain-friendly e-learning. It's very important. It's critically important. We keep forgetting that at the end of the day, the learner is our objective. They need to learn information. They need to remember and use it. And it doesn't matter how fancy the e-learning is. And I just spent some time in the exhibit hall, and so many vendors, and none of them have an idea what they're doing in terms of the more... That was not a joke. That was a sad state of affair. They don't know what they're doing in the sense of the cognitive issue. They're very good at the technical aspects. Like the Metropolitan Police Armed Unit are very good in their training. They have to hit a benchmark of pulling a gun out in a certain speed and hitting a target at a certain distance, at a certain size, and doing it correctly. But if they don't get the cognitive training, don't understand how the mind works, self-fulfilling prophecies, escalation of commitment, and so on and so forth, they may and have shot, for example, the Brazilian guy in London. And that is the kind of training that right now I'm working with the Met Police and the medical domain in many different domains to deal with an element that is forgotten, which is the human element, which is what is the most critical issue here. It makes learning easy and effective is what makes it important. And you can get more for less. If you hit the nail on the head, if you know how the brain processes information, then you can design the learning, optimize technology to deliver what it's supposed to deliver. And I dare say that otherwise you're doomed for failure. And this is not a scientific fact. It's my view that a lot of failure, I'm in England, so haven't reached its potential, if you want it phrased nicely. E-learning has failed because it has not taken this on board. a lot of investment in technology, in animation, in interactive videos, gaming. But the question is it helping the learner, the brain of the learner, pick up and learn more effectively, remember it, and use it? When we talk about brain-friendly learning, I would like to distinguish between 3 levels. The first level is fixing problem in existing e-learning. A lot of the e-learning that I see and go over have huge problems in terms of being brain-friendly, so we want to fix it. We don't want to do things that are wrong. We want to make the learning at a deeper level more cognitively and brain effective. And the third level, when we talk about brain-friendly e-learning, is develop totally new approaches to how to deliver training effectively based on understanding of the brain and how we process information. So these 3 different levels, I want very quickly to show you some examples of what I'm talking about. Am I going too quickly? No. I'm going to talk about cognitive load, so I have to be careful. Fixing problem in existing e-learning. For example, one example is cognitive load. Often the e-learning surpasses cognitive capacity of the learners. If we had time, I could show you mathematical formulas. We know how much information the brain can process. What is the capacity? If you overload it, it's not going to go there. Like a car, if you put too much weight, it cannot move. The same thing with e-learning. And I go over a lot of e-learning and say they can't learn it. Sometimes they say, we don't care, because it's health and safety. We need to tick the box that they got the training. Or if it's a company that it's regulations, they say, we have to teach it. If not, we're not doing the regulations. So I say, okay, teach it, but let's make sure, rather than they don't learn anything, what are the important stuff in the regulation that is important for you that they learn to do a better job that is not just bureaucracy or red tape, so we can make sure they pay attention to doing that. Now, when we fix it many times, the easy way, which is better than nothing, is to reduce the amount of information. There's too much information. The brain can't process it. Here's how much your brain can process. You decide what you want to teach them. And here's the capacity. We can quantify it and give measurements. But what is interesting to do is, rather than reducing the capacity, to increase cognitive load. How do you do that? You're not going to make people smarter, or it's very hard to increase the brain capacity. A lot of work with very little return is to package it more effectively from a cognitive perspective. So we can take the same amount of information and have what I call a qualitative change rather than a quantitative change, where you don't change the quantity of information but just convey it more effectively and efficiently. 2 examples. Again, I'm just scratching the surface. Cognitive consistency, setting up the right expectation. I go over a lot of technology, enhanced learning, e-learning, and see auditory and visual. And it's very confusing when it's on, when it's off. A lot of cognitive resources of the learner is spent just figuring out what's going on. And the same with control and navigation. One time you click on the top, one time you click. The learner is engaged in the learning and spending the limited brain capacity figuring out the navigation rather than focusing the resources on the material that is learned. So you can talk about cognitive consistency, top-down processes to make better use of the cognitive resources. Another thing is to cause, for example, pop-out effect. It's the important information. You see it more clearly. Let me give you an example. I'm going to show on the screen. Tell me if you see the odd one out, please. Pick up your hand when you can see it. All the black, the circle, the black is on the top, except the one here where you have the black on the bottom. Let's do another example, a bit different. Tell me if you can see the odd one. It's the top right. All of the circles look like craters, but one of them is going out like a hill, this one. Now, from a cognitive point of view, when we do it in the laboratory, the left one is very difficult for the brain to do. The more circles we add, the more time, the more mistakes, and the more resources and effort you need to detect that one. However, on the right, the one that's in a different perspective pops out. It doesn't matter how many other circles, that information the brain picks up. All the difference between the part on the left and the right is on the left, the change from black to white is the threshold, all black to all white, and on the right it's done gradually. By doing it gradually, this is perceived by a different part of the brain, which works differently and computes information differently. So we're not talking about reducing the amount of information. We're not talking about spending a lot of money on something fancy. A small change that costs no money can cause the information that you want people to pick up. As an example, it's here. I'll show you other examples later on to make it cognitively effective to deal with cognitive load. So this is about fixing the problem in terms of cognitive load. We have a lot of papers on the web. I'm just a few titles. Brain-friendly learning technology, what is it and why we need it? A cognitive perspective on technology-enhanced learning, great opportunities, pitfalls, and challenges. And the book, don't buy it. It's out in 2 weeks, but it's don't buy it. Technology-enhanced learning and cognition. Don't buy it because they charge a lot of money for no reason for this book. I'm going to put it on the web, the entire book. Probably get sued, but they're charging like £140 per book, which is no reason for that. But all of this is going to be on the web page. And this is just a few examples of titles of articles that deal with the first level that we're talking about. Fixing, when you go over cognitive load, for example, when the learning is not brain-friendly, it's brain-unfriendly. It doesn't work with the brain, it works against the brain. That's not good. So we need to fix that. If you do that, that's excellent. But let's make it more efficient, optimize, for example, the interactions in the learners. So the learners are participating, are involved. We have it in interactive videos, in games. That's wonderful. Just to make sure they're not having so much fun that they don't learn anything. And that's a problem with a lot of the gaming and the interactive video. They are engaged, they are participating, they have a great time and they say they love it, but are they really learning? The question is how to cognitively, correctly underpin the learning in the interaction so they learn. The gaming is there to increase the learning by proper interaction. Make sure, another example, again, just very quick examples, make sure the learners acquire the best mental representations. When you learn anything, the brain represents the information. And there are different ways the brain can represent it, different parts of the brain. You need to make sure that it represents it the way you want it from a learning perspective. What do I mean by that? First of all, it's easy to acquire. It's very easy for the brain. Give it in the format that the brain is going to use it. So the learner doesn't need to transform it, spending cognitive resources to a mental representation. Make sure they remember it. You have an e-learning module. They learn. They're happy. You do a test. They can do it. One mental representation, they're going to forget a day later. The other one, they're going to remember for years. Not only they're going to remember, they can't forget it. Like a song, keeps playing in your head all the time. Make it this way, an effective mental representation. And again, we're not talking about very fancy, expensive, just small changes in the way you represent the information. And you want it to affect behavior. Because all that learning, if they learn, if they remember, many times they don't use it. They go back to the desk and did what they did before. It doesn't modify behavior. Don't use it. So if you have the right mental representation in the brain, they're going to remember it, they're going to acquire it easy, and they're going to use it. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Training people to identify aircraft. Work I do with the U.S. Air Force. So they need to identify an aircraft in any orientation. What examples do you use in your training? You all use examples. Why do you use those examples? I always ask and say, well, I think it's good, but what examples you use are critical. For example, here are different orientations which you can represent an aircraft when you teach pilots to identify aircraft. Very important. Life and death decisions. Make sure they don't shoot their own aircraft. And we have this on the web, a whole paper. Some orientation, when you present them during learning, they remember well, and some they don't. Some are effective and some are not. So the orientation of the aircraft during training is critical which examples you show them. Not only which examples, but what order. Even when you have the examples, if you represent and expose the learner to the same example in a different order, they form totally different mental representations. They learn different stuff. And we have research on that. So this is critical. And every time I go to companies that develop e-learning and training and have examples, say, why are you using these examples? Why are you giving it in this order? And there's no answer. But there is a scientific answer which examples to use, in what order to form the best mental representation. And not only on fancy stuff at aircraft. B&Q, I've done work with B&Q. So they have to train the salespeople to understand the difference between a heating system, a combi system, and a central boiler, and all this stuff. And how do you represent it? Do you show one and then the other, or in the different order? Or do you put them one against one? This is critical. This is going to make the learning easy or difficult for the learner, and whether they're going to remember it or not. And not only with B&Q, I've done work with PwC. So they have all these regulations change every 6 months, a book. I can't even pick it up. There was something like this with new tax regulations. How to represent those issues so they can learn it. If not, you just throw it on the learner. Don't take into account if they learn. Make sure they acquire the information you want them to acquire in the correct mental representations. And how you represent the material during e-learning is going to determine it. And I know I said it twice, I'll say it for the last time, and I'm not talking about some expensive solution, buy new software, new skills, and make the e-learning more expensive. No, the same effort, same cost to make small changes in what you give them has far-reaching implications if the brain is going to acquire it easily, remember it, and going to use it. And again, you're welcome to go to the website, just a few titles of papers. Each one is a long, boring paper. Making training more cognitively effective, making videos interactive, learning presentation, the effect of stimulus, similarity, and canonical frame alignment on mental representation, helping the cognitive system learn, exaggerating distinctiveness and uniqueness, and plenty more stuff. Now we're getting to the third level. I'm not talking about fixing when you don't take cognitive load into consideration. I'm not talking about picking the right examples and thinking of the mental representation. I'm talking about a novel approach, an innovative approach altogether from understanding the cognitive and the brain perspective. Very little time. I'll give you an example from the medical domain. Many errors happen in the medical domain all the time, and mistakes that they themselves say should have never happened in the first place. They've spent huge amounts of money, not only in the UK, but in North America and many other countries, to minimize, and I'm being polite by saying it has very limited success. Just recently, The Independent in October revealed surgeon who operated on the wrong leg. If you know how many times they amputate the wrong leg of the patient, operate on the wrong side of the brain, cut the wrong hand, not very good, and that's not... Obviously. For example, it said here, despite government pledges that it should never happen, figures revealed yesterday by the National Patient Safety Agency revealed 57 people in England went through wrong side surgery in the last year. If you think The Independent is not very scientific, it's not. The paper that came out just a month ago in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most important journal, about temporal rates in patient harm resulting from medical care. A polite way to say they made a mistake and they have caused patient care. In fact, what the doctors themselves, before that, medication, I don't have too much time, but they give the wrong medication to the patient, they give the wrong dosage, they give it in the wrong time. When they give the right medication in the right time, in the right dosage, we give it to the wrong patient at the same time. If you get anything from this talk, check before anybody gives you any medication twice. That will be good. Infections, we all know about it. The doctors themselves have reported in America more people die every year as a result of medical error. I'm talking about dying, not about harm, like amputating the wrong leg, we don't even count, than people who die in America from AIDS, car accident, and breast cancer together, combined. And this is what the doctors themselves report as a direct death of medical error. So it's a huge, huge problem. So we have developed a total novel approach to reduction of error. I'll show you an example because it's not only theoretical. We've developed applications. I'll show it to you. I have very little time, so I put it also on the web. But basically, for example, in medication, they come and say, remember to give the right medication. Remember, check the dosage. Wash your hands. Make sure to do this. And it's like talking to the wall. It's not that the nurses and the surgeons and the consultants don't care. The brain doesn't remember it. Until you burn yourself, you learn, right? We all know that everyone told you, or you tell people, save the file, save. People don't save until you lose the file. Then you start saving until you lose a few days' work. That's human nature. And it's a cognitive representation. So rather than basing all the training on error reduction by saying, remember to do this, I say, forget about error reduction. Don't train people to reduce error. Train people to recover from error. Error recovery, how to mitigate when you make a mistake. Not only because mistakes are going to happen, and when they happen, they need to know what to do, but the cognitive claim is that if you train them for doing that, you will reduce the errors happening in the first place. Because when they see the errors happening, they learn to identify them and to recover. It's a much more salient representation in the brain, and they will avoid the error in the first place more effectively. And for example, with the AO Foundation, we've developed this application. I'll just show you very briefly. And basically, the whole science of how to do it, they see a video where we intentionally make typical errors. We talk with the surgeons what mistakes happen during the operation. This is simulated, not from real operations, even though we have many real videotapes, but for legal reasons we didn't show them. Have to see when things go wrong, and then the hot spots. They have to click on the mistake that happens, and then, for example, they get a multiple choice. Why that happens, what you need to do. And on the right, they get a score. Every time they find something, they get a score. They answer correctly, they get a nice tick, and the score goes up. They give the wrong answer, the score goes down. And it will list on the mistakes that they have identified. I won't go through the entire video. Every time they click, and when they finish seeing the video of the operations and the mistakes, it says, good that you've detected this, what do you need to do? What about this error that you didn't detect? And show them that what they haven't. It gives them a score, compares them to other surgeons, and so on and so forth. And they fix the mistake. So here they fix the mistake. Once they fix the mistakes, you can't identify it anymore. In the video, I'll stop this before it gets too bloody. Some people may not like this. And this is an example where we have developed an actual application applying error recovery training rather than error reduction training. And we even, AO Foundation, I did it for them, have agreed that I'll put it on the web. We have also a paper coming out so you can see the entire video on the web. But the message here is just an example where understanding the cognitive system, we say, let's approach the problem totally different. We've been spending a lot of energy, gas in neutral. We're not moving anywhere. Try a more brain-friendly approach. And again, a novel approach to minimizing error in the medical domain, cognitive neuroscientific insights into training, optimizing the use of external cognitive aids for increasing learning, something totally different, overcoming learning barriers through knowledge management, etc. This is for people who don't know how to read and write. So I'm not talking only about training surgeons and pilots, but also training people who need to learn basic skills. And there's plenty more if you go to the website. So these are the kind of the three levels that I talk about, fixing existing problem, making it more effective, and developing new approaches. But we all assume when we talk about brain-friendly learning that all brains are equal, and they're not. And I'm not talking about people who have dyslexia or colorblind and all the other things which are important. I'm talking, I hope you're not going to blame the messenger, we all have different brains, for better and for worse. So when we try to train, you need to get the right people to train. You need to know what is needed if you're training for a salesperson, for a call center, for any domain, what is needed to do the job, and who has what it takes, so I can train. And what is needed for the job, I call it cognitive profiles. And then we need the test and measurements to make sure we train people who have what it takes from the brain perspective. Without this, our job, your job, is almost impossible. You all know when you train from a group of 100 people, 5, 10 people, you waste all your energy and it's like beating a dead horse. They don't get it. 80% are okay, and 10%, before you finish talking, they got it. They have something that clicks. Why not get them to training? They give you all this raw material of brain that may not be suited for what you're trying to train. Not only it makes your life difficult, it's unfair for the people who you try to train them for something that they're not good at. And they may be very talented in doing something else. So let me talk for the 2 minutes I have left on cognitive profiles and testing measurements. Cognitive profile is a detailed description of the abilities required to do the job. And it's not only cognitive, it's for salespeople. They need to be patient and polite. I am not qualified. I have no patience. Somebody doesn't understand. So don't buy it. Get out, of the store. Rather than smiling and explaining again, they buy the product. It's not my temperament. It's not my cognitive style. So you need to know what is needed for any job. For example, in higher domains that I do some of the work, forensic examiner, medical anatomists, pilots, airport staff, security, and more. We have a paper on visual spatial abilities of pilots, for example, defining what are the abilities needed to fly a plane. We have a paper from very recent about spatial ability of expert medical anatomists who need to know where the different parts of the body are. Doing surgery, they don't use their eyes. Many times they have to put, I won't get into details, but they have to put their hands in your body and feel different parts. So they have to have an ability to translate tactile, somatosensory information to visual spatial representation. What are those abilities? And then we need to be able to test them. Who has them? Once you know the profiles, you need to be able to know, here's what's needed. I can tell you if you have them or not. Example of a project I'm working with FBI on fingerprint examiners. We've done that, and we came with a list of cognitive abilities in terms of mental rotation, dealing with noise, perception of curvature and features, a lot of fancy cognitive terms, and we translate it to very practical training. From the top, from the target, which of the 12 lines is the same curvature? Some people can do it and some can't. If you can, you can be a fingerprint examiner. If not, we're wasting time to train you and frustrating you. Can you follow the line from K, where it goes to, because it ends in B? If you can't follow the line, not under pressure right here, but in a test where you sit quietly, then you won't be a good fingerprint examiner. If you can't say which shape here from the 15 is most similar to this one, then you're not as easily trainable. We're wasting a lot of energy. It's not easy to develop it. It requires expertise and effort. However, it's worthwhile. It's so cost-effective because you spend so much energy training them. The ones that are not really trainable, they pass the training because you need to have a good success rate. They go to the job and they don't do a good job. Worst case scenario, they stay at the job for many years, and if not, they leave after 6 months or a year. What a waste of money and resources to go on this track which is leading nowhere. Now, you may have no control over this. HR in most companies I worked with hire who they want, and the people who train have nothing to do. You get the raw material, and it's your problem. They pick the wrong people, and now you need to train them. You should have it, but even if you don't have the input to that, you can screen for those who are easier to train. So if you have a big company, say, oh, you want to do this training, that's great. And you begin the training with, or in the office before they come to the training or go on, they have to do some kind of games, pick whatever the domain is. And if they do it, great. And if they can't do it, then you know they're not going to benefit from the training, not because you didn't design it well, because they don't have what it takes. and you can put it in the polite, PC, correct way of telling people that they have great talent, but maybe they need to do something else or go for a different training module. And if you... 5 seconds and I'm done. I'm sure that's a British comment. I'm over my time already. And 2, if you can't do that, you have to train people. These are the people who are working in the call center, and they need to know the product information. Then by knowing who you're dealing with, you can fit the training to the abilities, the relative, I'll say it in a politically correct way, the relative strengths of the learner. So you want to optimize and take advantage of their strengths. And by doing this test, even if you have to train them, you can't say, I can't train you. This is your crowd. They have to train them how to answer the phone and to give information in Orange. I did a project with Orange on the new phones and the new tariff. Don't train all of them the same. Even if it's brain-friendly, the first part, they don't all have the same brain. So by doing a few questions in the beginning, the training can adapt to take advantage of the relative strengths of the learner. Is everyone trainable? To some extent, yes. To some extent, it has to do with brain plasticity. My time is up, so I'm not going to talk about it. To finish up, yes, you have to do brain-friendly training. 3 levels: fix problems, make it effective mental representation, develop new approaches. But also, in addition, and I throw it to you, concern yourself and take proactive measures to get the right people and fit the e-learning to the individuals taking it. Thank you very much.
Right, well, we've got time for just a couple of questions at this stage from Itiel, if anyone has them, and then we'll hand over to Chris. Has anybody got any questions?
And don't blame the messenger. No, quick and easy. If you do it quick and easy, take off-the-shelf tests, and I can send you a whole paper on that. They're not fitted for that specific job requirement. They're very general tests or off-the-shelf. Some of them are free, some are not, but they're not going to be good for the specific domain. So there's no easy way. It is an effort, but it is extremely cost-effective, but no quick and easy. Quick and easy and cheap, and you get what you pay for, unfortunately.
One more before we hand over to Chris. Anybody? Yep.
Hi, very interested in the Orange piece. Do you have a white paper on the approaches and the impact?
I have one, and I'll drop an email, and I'll ask him if I can release it, because it was a private project for them, and hopefully we'll be able to release it, yeah.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Itiel. That was really good. So we're now going to hand over a little bit of technological swapping going on here to Dr. Chris Appleton. Chris is a senior lecturer at the School of Psychology for the University of Central Lancashire. And she's an applied cognitive psychologist and comes from a background of using brain imaging to understand visual object recognition. And in particular, at the moment, is exploring the use of visual tools in learning and education to kind of maximize on learning and attention. So she's going to take us into the next stage of this exploration of the mind. Thanks, Chris. There we are. We're there.
Do we need it for the video? Will this be audible on camera, or do I need to stand by here?
Yeah, that's good stuff. Lots of food for thought.
That's what I want. Right?
Yeah.
Only when I do 8 or 16 hours.
Turn you on.
Okay, all good? Brilliant. Hi. Yeah, we have a technical problem. Excuse me one sec. Okay, here we go. Great. Okay, hi. I'm Chris. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Central Lancashire, which is in Preston. I have been tweeting about the conference as Finite Attention. If anyone's tweeting this is who I am. Just thought I'd let you know up front. There is no pressure to tweet this talk. Actually, I'd really quite like it if you engage and take part. So I'm going to be talking about some aspects of cognitive psychology and how we might bring those to bear in a learning environment. And I'm not going to talk about the wide range of examples like Itiel has done, which has been really interesting. I'm going to be quite specific today, but I hope this will be of use to people.